Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at Thestartupfactory.tech.
Hi everybody, welcome back to an episode of From the Factory Floor. I'm just laughing to myself because regular listeners will be able to tell immediately, I hope, that I am not James Brookes today, but I am in the hot seat. I've taken advantage of him not being available this afternoon, and I'm joined by Ian. Hi Ian, how are you?
Hi Nyree, yeah, I'm very well, thank you. And at least when you can get a word in edgeways now, James is on a sabbatical today.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back for the next one, but I never miss an opportunity to jump in his seat if I can do. Hopefully, I'll do it justice. Thank you for joining me today. So we're going to talk about something that I was just saying to you off air, even I find a bit confusing, and I work kind of quite closely to it. And what we're talking about today is kind of the role of non-execs, advisors, and mentors for startup founders in particular. And it was a bit of a selfish one, really, because I did have some genuine questions around it, and I think Ian, you are absolutely the best person to answer those questions. I know you act in several of those capacities for different founders. I just wondered, in the first instance, perhaps if you could just give us a little bit of an overview between the differences around advisors, non-execs, and mentors, particularly with the startup hat on.
Yes, it's a really interesting point actually, which I must admit I'm not really thought through, but it is a good point to start. So there's obviously overlap between the three, but a startup founder needs various support, and the team needs different support at different stages in their growth cycle. So it's important, I think, that you kind of know when to dip in and dip out, and what sort of support you need. For me, a mentor is very much someone who can work closely with the founder and almost challenge their thinking by giving them some options. Have you thought about this? Why are you thinking that way? Why do you need to make this decision now? Almost like a sounding board is a mentor, just trying to guide the thinking and certainly not directing them towards an answer. Provoking and creating the conditions where a founder can work with a mentor just to check in on their thinking and the shape of their thinking. Advisor probably tends to be a bit more formal, Nyree, because you kind of think about specific advice, be it legal, be it financial. So, it could be technical advice, it could be legal advice around intellectual property. The framework when you start a company at the outset, you need legal advice on shareholding agreements and stuff like that. So, surrounding yourself with the right advisors for specific tasks, I think is quite important. And if I can just refer folk to our book, From the Factory Floor, with a chapter in there from John Davidge, who's a partner of Berman's, a firm of solicitors in Manchester we work closely with. And John lays out the legal framework and what legal advice you need and when. And then the third one is non-execs. So non-execs are hands-on, hands-in, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what support the founder needs. But a non-exec is someone who is more than a sounding board. They can actually roll their sleeves up and get stuck in and do things with you as a founder based on their experience and to the extent that you need it. So mentor is more of a light touch for a founder, a sounding board. Advisor, deep dive when you need specific advice on commercial, legal stuff. And a non-exec is kind of part of the extended team, a critical friend, really, just to challenge, but also do stuff and really help the business grow.
Bro, thank you. And I knew you would definitely be the person to offer up some clarity around these explanations, because you do act in certainly, I'd say all three capacities for different founders from TSF and various other projects, past and present, don't you?
Yeah, and it's something I enjoy, and the variety, I think, kind of keeps me on my toes, but also, it's knowing when to intervene and knowing when not to, and judging the personal relationship and rapport you have with the founder, and knowing when the boundaries, knowing when to push, knowing when to challenge. I think there's some common threads between the three, though, that all founders should look for. Trust is the number one. And you've got a personal rapport. You feel that these folk, in whichever guise they are, Nyree, that they've got your back, and they're continually looking after your best interests. So I think there's some personal issues and threads around it. But yeah, it's to what extent you do get involved. You know when to step back and give a founder space, and you know when you intervene. I must admit, I like getting involved, but I know when not to get in the way. And I think that's an important rule that an advisor, mentor, or non-exec should think about, that it's not their business. Equally, they don't want the founder to make mistakes, but they should really help them steer their course. And I often just think it's kind of recognizing when the founder's vulnerable or got some knowledge or experience gap, and knowing what sort of intervention you need. But I'd encourage founders to kind of get to a point where, I don't know, they're 70% confident, they've got all the information they need to make a decision before engaging any advice. Really, it's your business, and you need to learn, and you need to learn how to operate on your own as well.
Bro, thank you. And for founders that are perhaps just starting out or just thinking about kind of expanding their network on a more formal basis, where is the best place to start looking about making those sorts of connections and finding advisors or potential non-execs?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think again I come back to around that the qualities of whatever role the individual's playing with a founder is kind of by personal recommendation. So going into your community, going into your network groups, explaining what needs support, what type of support or advice that you think you need, and getting those personal recommendations. There are people like myself who have kind of had, the best days are behind them. They've had their career, but they've still got things to offer. They've got energy, they've got insight, they've got medals and scars. Finding those people through the networks and personal recommendation, I think, is the best place to go. Going out for coffee, just getting to know these folk as individuals, I think, is the key thing. Like I say, you've got to be able to get on with people and feel that they've got some domain advice and knowledge that will be relevant to you. But you kind of want a dynamic relationship with them as well. You want to be proactive when you want to be proactive. So judging what sort of relationship you're going to have with them. So yeah, personal recommendation for me every time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the best place to find them.
And a bit of good old fashioned networking by the sounds of it as well. So yeah, really useful. And in terms of when a founder sort of recognises that they have got a bit of a gap that they need to plug, and they are looking at bringing on an advisor or non-exec mentor, what do you offer? Is it a formal package? Is it remuneration, equity? What's kind of best practice in these scenarios?
I'm not sure there's a best practice. I can only kind of offer you a kind of what's worked for me, and kind of the long-standing relationships that I've had. I mean, I kind of, when I bump into these people or get introduced to founders, I kind of say, look, let's have a couple of months working together, just seeing how we click. What's the chemistry like? Do you think I'm adding value? Do I think I've added value? So certainly, I think a 2 or 3 months unpaid stint is valuable before you commit to any kind of commercial arrangement. I think it's about respecting people for the time, their advice. As a founder, you don't want to abuse them, but equally you want to use them thoroughly. Equally, I think you do need a degree of altruism and philanthropy if you're going to be a mentor or a non-exec, because you can't run it by the clock. So in my experience, what I've preferred to do is take a sweat equity stake. So you take equity, and therefore you are at risk. And straight away, you're not taking cash out the startup, which is obviously the lifeblood and already in short supply in most cases. And by taking shares and equity, my commitment is, well, I'm standing side by side with you. I'm sharing the risk. We've got aligned interests, and those shares are only of value when we exit this on the journey together. So there's a risk reward. I appreciate not every non-exec or mentor would want to just take shares. That's the personal thing for me. It's been quite effective for me. I've been fortunate with a couple of ventures that have worked well. But I think at the outset, do it for free and then discuss the currency. And it has to be a two-way thing. I think taking cash out of a startup is kind of just not the right thing to do. And for me, equity is the right currency. For advisors, obviously, it's different. Working with a professional services firm, then it has to be cash.
So in terms of remuneration and equity, obviously you've talked about that. Do you bring somebody in on a structured basis, or I suppose from the non-exec or advisor as well, it's useful for them to be able to plan their time and know sort of how much capacity they're likely to need? I think probably it sounds like it would be a good idea to agree kind of the scope of the work or the scope of what those next few months looks like. How do you tend to approach it in terms of outcomes and outputs with founders?
Yeah, I think it does need to be structured because you need that to be able to deliver value and for the founders and the startup venture to get value from you. There needs to be some expectations defined and set at the outset. So for me as a non-exec, one of the things I try to bring is a degree of professionalism and discipline from the outset. Monthly management meetings or board meetings. Is there a sales meeting? Is there a product development meeting? So try and put in that framework of professional management, not bureaucracy, but just so that they're focused on the right things and moving the business forward. So I like to kind of have a 2 hourly board meeting every month. If they want me to get involved in other project meetings or sales meetings, I'm more than happy to do that. But again, always set the time boundaries. And equally, make sure as a founder you are briefing your non-exec to ensure that they're thinking ahead of these sessions. So they've got the opportunity to think about the options and leverage their own experience. Mentoring, I think, is more ad hoc. It's kind of more informal. I do that with a couple of my folk, and we have fortnightly sessions tentatively in the diary, and they're more just conversational pieces. How you're feeling, what's happening, what are the challenges, where do you feel vulnerable, what's not working at the moment. And while some of those can be business and advisory sessions, the mentoring approach I choose is much more personal, about the founder's personal development and their role in the business. Are they looking to the horizon? What does success look like for them? And one of the important things around both those roles, either as a mentor or as a non-exec, you've got to be a good listener and a good communicator. You've got to be empathetic, but equally, you can't be soft. You've got to kind of play back, well, what I'm hearing, Nyree, is you're not really got a grip on this, or, you're not really looking at the options. But it has to be time bounded. I think there have to be structure to it, so there's mutual respect. And equally, non-execs and mentors have got more than one client. So while it's not necessarily a business to be run, they need to balance their time. So I think setting the time expectations, the frequency, like I say, don't get caught in a paralysis of advice. Make your own mark, make your own decisions, and use mentors at a personal level and non-execs at a business level to check in, validate your thinking, make sure you've looked at the options, or if you've got something that is out of your personal experience, ask for that guidance from non-exec. Did you ever come across this situation when you were in my position? But fundamentally, it's about respecting each other, and equally, mentors and non-execs shouldn't step in and run the business. They should provide the rails, really, in terms of how you operate as a founder and where the business is going.
Okay, Brill, thank you. And in terms of quantity, because I think we have seen some founders on some occasions almost collect non-execs and mentors and advisors, and obviously then it can get a bit confusing because you're using lots of people's time. There's lots of conflicting information. Is there a standard kind of blueprint for what a startup might be looking for, or kind of a limit in terms of what you would expect to see them bringing in?
Yeah, I think if you're not careful, you have more non-execs around the table than
Yeah.
execs, early on, and really founders, I say, shouldn't seek to collect too many. I think the ratio really is if you've got, one non-exec to two founders, that works well. Each founder may have a mentor that is helping them with their thinking, building their confidence, pointing them to research or learning opportunities. I think it's making sure that you are professionalizing the organization to the extent it needs that structure, but you're kind of nurturing them to be confident of their own thinking and work in their own way, and not imposing yourself too much. So the voices around the table should be very much, 80% founder-led, 20% mentors, non-execs. You may have more than one non-exec, just depending on what your business is. If there's a sales and marketing expertise needed, or if there's some technology, where there are different domains, I think it's fine to get a couple of people around that, but it can get a bit cluttered and a bit noisy. So you're absolutely right. I think long and hard about the type of people you want supporting you, the timing of that, and the number. And that will change as a startup goes through the growth cycle. Early, very, very early stage, probably just needs someone to give them confidence that they're heading in the right direction. When they have got the prototype or proof of concept and they're ready to go to market, then bringing in someone who's got sales and marketing expertise can help guide them. Finance, again, is one of those things that most founders probably not got tons of experience. So the advisory role of an accountant to a startup from day one, to be honest, in terms of managing the cash and managing the numbers. But I think you need the business to be dynamic, and like I say, don't get overawed or look to non-execs or mentors as too much of a supporting pillar. They're there just to nudge you, to point you in the right direction, to kind of help you with some of the tough decisions, confirm your thinking. So I certainly one or two maximum. When I was in the PLC, we had a PLC main board of 4 execs and 3 non-execs. One of the non-execs was a chairman. The other 2 were very much there for domain and specific advisory roles. But yeah, it's your business. Run it as you want to, but just use external folk to give you that guidance and just keep you on the right track.
Thank you. And I think one of the things you were saying is really the non-exec or the advisor is to see the founder through the next stage of their journey, but then it might be that you review that and bring somebody in that can see you through the stage after that, from startup to scale up. And I think one of the things you were saying about obviously bringing somebody in with accountancy expertise or finance expertise is great, but I think just to clarify, that isn't somebody that's going to come in and run the payroll, for example, or do the doing, unless you're doing those bits as well, and I didn't know about it.
No, absolutely. And I think, a number of things around that. My background is finance, so I've often sat in sales meetings, for example, and just asked questions around pricing and commercial terms and stuff like that. So it's still that commercial business advisory role from a finance person. But you make a good point about that scale up and growth. And equally, there comes a point in time where the business has evolved and it needs a different voice. So I have a rule of thumb not to outstay my welcome, and typically look for a non-exec role to last between 3 and 4 years. If you've not been able to make an impact in that time period, or the business hasn't progressed, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Either with the chemistry of the people, the advice, or indeed the business itself. So I kind of say at the outset, look, I'm expecting to be here 3 to 4 years, but thereafter you need a different skill set and a different voice and a different relationship. And I think that's healthy. You don't want to outstay your welcome. The relationships can become a little bit complacent. As a non-exec, you do have to help them with the tough decisions and point out where they need to make the tough decisions if indeed they're not making it. And similarly with the mentoring relationship, that change of voice, change of style, I think refreshes the founders and is just a good practice for businesses to adopt.
Yeah. So all in all, I think finding the right advisor, mentor, or non-exec can absolutely help your business fly, can't it? Equally, I suppose, getting a relationship with somebody where you're not adding value or you're not quite gelling together can be really detrimental. So it sounds like you say, going through networks and asking your current network for recommendations is a brilliant place to start. We've certainly seen firsthand how founders can benefit from non-execs and advisors, but that's because we know a particularly good one who always seems to put his hand up when there's some capacity around. So thanks, Ian. I think that's really interesting. Hopefully it's kind of clarify for everybody out there the kind of different roles around mentors, non-execs, advisors, and the value they can add. Perhaps it will be good to get a couple of founders on actually over the next few episodes and get them to talk about their experience of working with advisors and non-execs, because it can be a secret weapon, can't it, for a startup?
Absolutely. Either as a solo founder, you've got a voice there, you've got a shoulder to cry on. If you've had a really bad day and it's a tough day and you just need to unload, then a non-exec or a mentor is good for that. If you've got co-founders, it's not always sweetness and light in the relationship, and having a third leg in the stool helps. But I'd say the key things, Nyree, are very much look for recommendations, try before you buy. If people aren't willing to commit to in a couple of months free with you, then they're not in it for the right reason. And make sure they're good listeners and they're good communicators, because that has a lasting and immediate impact on your decision making. But I think it goes without saying that from a Startup Factory point of view, those ventures that we've built that have got good non-execs, good mentors, go faster, and it's a smoother, better journey for the founder by having that external voice in the business.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ian. Thanks, everybody. I hope it's been as interesting for you all as it has for us. We'll pop any relevant links into the description below, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm sure James will be grabbing his seat back with a vengeance.
Oh, his comeback will be loud and proud, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course he will. Oh, thanks, Ian. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we've said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@StartupFactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.